the nation the Bible named. More than 2,500 years ago, long before modern nations existed, long before global politics shaped the world we know today, the Bible recorded something remarkable. Ancient Hebrew prophets wrote about a powerful nation rising in the region we now call Iran. They described its power, they described its alliances, they described its weapons, and they even described events that would unfold far beyond their own time. For many people, prophecy feels distant, like ancient poetry or symbolic language that belongs only to history. But when we slow down and look carefully at the scriptures, we begin to see something extraordinary. The Bible does not merely describe spiritual ideas. It often speaks directly about nations, leaders, and historical movements. And one of the clearest examples of this is found in the book of Daniel. In the 3rd year of King Belshazzar's reign, the prophet Daniel received a vision from God. In that vision, he found himself standing beside the Ulai Canal in the province of Susa. This location is not symbolic. Susa was a real city located in what is now southwestern Iran. It was one of the ancient capitals of the Persian Empire. And it is here that Daniel sees something powerful. He sees a ram with 2 horns. One horn is higher than the other, and the higher horn rises later. The ram charges in multiple directions, westward, northward, and southward, conquering everything in its path. Nothing can stand against it. Nothing can rescue from its power. Daniel is deeply troubled by the vision. He does not understand what it means. So God sends the angel Gabriel to explain it. And Gabriel speaks with striking clarity. The ram that you saw with the 2 horns represents the kings of Media and Persia. There is no mystery here. The Bible interprets itself. The ram represents the Medo-Persian Empire, the ancient civilization that once ruled the region we now call Iran. This empire became one of the most powerful in human history. It expanded west into Babylon and Egypt. It moved north toward the Caucasus and Central Asia, and it extended south toward the Persian Gulf. The ram pushed in every direction, and history confirms that Persia became one of the greatest empires the ancient world had ever seen. But Daniel's vision did not simply describe the past. It revealed a pattern. Empires rise, power expands. But ultimately, every kingdom built by human hands is temporary. Daniel later saw another power rise and defeat the ram. The Persian Empire eventually fell, just as the vision foretold. What this tells us is something important. God is not distant from history. He sees the rise of nations. He sees the fall of kingdoms. And long before events unfold, Scripture reminds us that God already understands the direction of history. The story of Persia in the Bible is not merely about political power. It is about God's sovereignty over the world. And when we move further into Scripture, we see that Persia, or Iran, appears again in another prophetic vision. This time, the focus is not just on a single empire, it is on an alliance. The prophetic alliance. The prophet Ezekiel lived during a time of exile and uncertainty for Israel. Yet in the middle of that difficult period, God revealed something extraordinary about the future. In Ezekiel chapter 38, the prophet describes a coalition of nations that would one day gather together in opposition to Israel. This prophecy has been studied for centuries, and within the list of nations mentioned, one name stands out clearly: Persia. Ezekiel writes, Persia, Cush, and Put will be with them, all of them with shield and helmet. Here we see several regions named together. Persia, modern Iran; Cush, often associated with regions of East Africa; Put, connected with North Africa. Other territories mentioned include Gomer and Beth Togarmah, areas associated with parts of modern Turkey and surrounding regions. For thousands of years, readers have wondered what this alliance might look like. How could so many distant regions become connected? The Bible does not always explain every detail, but it shows us something important about prophecy. God often reveals the outline of events long before we understand how they will unfold. Throughout history, alliances between nations have shifted constantly. Empires rise, treaties form, partnerships change. Yet Ezekiel's prophecy reminds us that God sees the broader direction of history. Whether these alignments occur politically, militarily, or spiritually, Scripture points toward a time when nations will gather together in dramatic ways surrounding the land of Israel. But even here, the Bible never presents prophecy as something that should lead us into fear. Instead, prophecy reminds us that history is not random. God is still in control. And as we continue reading the prophets, we encounter another passage that speaks about Persia in an even more detailed way. This prophecy appears in the book of Jeremiah, and it focuses on a specific region within the Persian world. The Bow of Elam. Jeremiah was known as a prophet who often spoke with remarkable precision. In chapter 49 of his book, God gives Jeremiah a message about Elam. Elam was an ancient civilization located within the territory of what is now southwestern Iran. This region existed long before the Persian Empire rose to prominence. And Jeremiah delivers a message that includes both judgment and hope. The prophecy begins with these words, "Behold, I will break the bow of Elam, the foremost of their might." In the ancient world, the bow represented military strength. Elamite archers were famous throughout the region. Their ability to project force over distance made them one of the most feared fighting forces of their time. So when Jeremiah speaks about the breaking of the bow of Elam, he is speaking symbolically about the collapse of military power. But the prophecy continues with a striking statement. God says he will bring the four winds from the four corners of heaven against Elam. This language describes pressure coming from multiple directions. Historically, Elam and Persia experienced invasions and conflicts from many surrounding powers. Yet the prophecy does not end in destruction. In fact, the final verse of this passage introduces something unexpected. Jeremiah writes, "In the latter days I will restore the fortunes of Elam." This is remarkable. Even in a prophecy about judgment, God includes a promise of restoration. This pattern appears again and again throughout Scripture. God confronts evil. God judges injustice. But God also opens the door to redemption. The story of nations is never the final story. God's ultimate desire is always restoration. And that leads us to something even more surprising. Because when we look at the modern nation of Iran today, we see a spiritual movement quietly unfolding beneath the surface. The throne God is raising. For decades, Iran has been known around the world primarily for its political tensions and conflicts. But something else has been happening inside the nation that many people do not realize. Despite intense pressure, persecution, and restrictions, the Christian faith has quietly spread throughout the country. Many missionaries and researchers have reported that the underground church in Iran has grown dramatically over the past few decades. House churches have formed. Believers gather quietly in homes. Scripture is shared carefully. Some people have even testified to encountering Jesus through dreams or personal spiritual experiences before ever meeting another Christian. Whether these stories occur through missionaries, personal testimony, or quiet gatherings of believers, they point toward a powerful truth. God is always working in places where the world least expects it. Throughout the Bible, we see this pattern repeatedly. God chooses unlikely people. God works in unexpected places, and often the greatest spiritual movements begin in times of pressure. Jeremiah spoke about a throne being established in Elam. Many scholars understand this symbolically as God's authority being revealed among the people. Not a political throne, but a spiritual one. A reminder that no government, no ideology, and no system can ultimately stop the movement of God's truth. When we zoom out even further, the Bible shows us that all prophecy ultimately points toward one central event, the return of Jesus Christ. The prophets Isaiah, Ezekiel, Zechariah, and others all point toward a future moment when God will intervene directly in human history. Zechariah describes a time when nations gather around Jerusalem, and in that moment, the Lord himself steps into history. The Bible tells us that Jesus will return, not as a suffering servant this time, but as the King of Kings. He will bring justice, he will end conflict, and he will establish a kingdom that will never be shaken. Every prophecy about nations, alliances, and history ultimately leads to this moment. Not to fear, but to hope. Because the story of the Bible is not ultimately about the rise and fall of empires. It is about redemption. It is about the God who loved the world so much that he sent his Son. And it is about the promise that one day Christ will return to bring lasting peace. So when we read passages about Persia, Elam, or the nations of the world, we should remember something important. God sees the entire story. What feels chaotic to us is never chaotic to him. History moves according to his purposes. And the same God who spoke through the prophets still calls people everywhere, including Iran, Israel, and every nation, to know him. Because the greatest prophecy of all is not about war or politics. It is about salvation. It is about the invitation Jesus gave to the world. Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. That invitation still stands today. And one day, when Christ returns, every nation will see that the promises of God were true all along. If this message helped you see Scripture in a deeper way, take a moment to like this video so more people can discover it. And I would love to hear your thoughts. Comment below, how do biblical prophecies shape the way you see the world today? And don't forget to subscribe to Daily Bible Light for more messages that bring biblical wisdom, encouragement, and truth into everyday life. May God guide your heart, strengthen your faith, and fill your life with His peace.